So close, you guys. So close. But after that third act, no cigar. And I hate that that was what I came away with when this movie was done. But unfortunately, there were too many things that piled up, especially at the end. This movie had me all the way up until the third act. Despite some stumbling along the way, it wasn't until it's the third act that it started to completely fall apart for me as far as the narrative and the way things flowed. But let me just get into, for starters, the premise and the things that I did like about the creator. I was excited to see the creator because it looked like something fresh, original, and in many ways it kind of was, but in a lot of ways it wasn't either, because some of these themes that we're introduced to are themes we've seen in multiple movies over the years. So it's not really quite as fresh as maybe it seemed from the trailers, but it was still enjoyable enough that I don't regret having watched it. I just feel like it had so much more potential and it just didn't live up to it. The bulk of this movie takes place in the year 2065. There's some stuff that happens about 5 years or so before that, and then we jump to 2065, and that's where we see most of the story happening. Oh my gosh, I forgot his character's name. John David Washington's character. I forgot his name. Lord. Anyway, his character, he's like this special forces dude, and he is tasked with trying to wipe out the creator. They call this person or entity or whatever they call it, the creator of these AI or something like that. So AI has basically taken over the world to the extent that it wiped out Los Angeles, and it lives completely integrated lives with people in other parts of the specifically, I think they call it New Asia. That's where most of this story takes place. And so the US has tasked itself with destroying AI everywhere. Because of what happened in Los Angeles, they don't want AI to exist anymore. The rest of the world, specifically New Asia, has not followed through with that, or they don't align with that sentiment. So the US has become very heavy-handed in their attempts to completely exterminate all AI. John David Washington was sent to try to infiltrate this group of humans and AI and to figure out stuff about the creator and ways to destroy the creator or this thing that the creator made. Along the way, he ends up suffering a great personal loss, and then he is brought in contact with this child. He gives the child the name Alfie. Oh, his name is Joshua. Maybe it's Joshua. Something like that. It starts with a J, I think. He gets caught up in stuff. They begin this journey throughout the area, and then it culminates in this climax at the end. He finds out some things along the way about his wife that he hadn't known. He finds out some things about this little child / AI. It's not really a person. They have some discussions about what it takes to get into heaven, and the little child says, well, it shows this in the trailer, she says that she won't get into heaven because she's not a person. So there's all this messaging going on about, is AI really sentient life, that sort of thing. Some of it's a bit heavy-handed and really stretches the narrative quite thin. I can't go there, honestly. I know we've been presented with all of this imagery, right? Because some of these AI machines, they wear human faces. Humans they call them dupes, or they duplicate their image so that can be put on some AI robots and stuff, so they look very human. Consequently, you've got a bunch of duplicates walking around with the same face. That's AI. So the messaging, which I'll get back around to that when I get to, like, I guess, the cons or whatever. So some stuff that I liked about this movie, and there were quite a few things to like. I enjoyed John David Washington's performance. I cannot get over how much he sounds like his dad. From the moment he opened his mouth in this movie, it was just like, wow, this is Denzel all over again. He doesn't necessarily look entirely like Denzel, but he sounds just like his daddy, and it's cool. he does a decent job at acting in here. He's not his father. He's not the caliber of his father, not yet, but I can definitely see he's got the potential to get there, or to get very close. And he carries the movie pretty well. There are other recognizable faces that we see here. Ken Watanabe, and the girl who's the head of, she's like the head of the military group that goes after them. It'll show her. Gosh, I don't remember where I've seen her, but you know who she is. She was pretty good. I mean, everybody was pretty good. The child actor was very good. There were some parts where it was a little wobbly for me, but in general, she did a really, really good job. I was impressed with the performance. There were some moments that plucked at the heartstrings with the child and with him and some of the conversations they would have. And the visuals were very beautiful. I mean, the cinematography, I really have no complaints about that. I heard that they spent about $80 million making this movie. And to me, what we see here visually looks absolutely amazing compared to some of the trash we've been getting from big name productions, you know, Marvel movies, DC movies. This topped a lot of those. Pretty much all of them. The concept designs are interesting. The way it was all integrated. I mean, the way the design of these AIs and the face on it was just, that was impressive. And stuff like that just demonstrates very clearly that a studio does not need to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at a production to give us something that looks good. They can throw a lot of money at something that looks good, but if the writing is bad, it all falls apart. That was part of the problem with this. It looked good. The writing was good up until a point, and then it kind of fell apart, but I'm still impressed with what we got. Really no complaints in that department as far as the visual stuff, the cinematography, the score, things like that. Unfortunately, while this film was pretty solid, 2/3 of the way through, the last third, oh, it just started to fall apart for me. I almost felt like maybe part of the problem was that they had maybe a lot of edits, things that were cut out. This movie is more than 2 hours long. It clocks in at like 2 hours 13 or something like that. Obviously, the final, 10 minutes or so are comprised of the credits. So, but it's still, it's a pretty sizable chunk of time. And I almost feel like the reason things felt so disjointed and clunky and just didn't flow as well the last act as they did the first two, it might be because of cuts that were made. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, it felt that way because there were too many plot contrivances or things that the writing did to make sure something happened, but ultimately the stuff that happened, it didn't make logical sense. Hold on a minute.
Hey, you saw me.
I heard you. What was I even saying? Plot contrivances. Tying back around to what I said about how they demonstrated that you don't need to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at a movie in order to have a visually solid production. They should have spent some of that money, or they should have spent a little bit extra money on hiring better writers, because this was the problem for me in the final portion of the film. It got to the point where, well, I'll give you some examples of certain issues that even happened throughout in the first couple parts, but I could overlook most of those things if it had held up in the end. Because it didn't, those things become bigger issues to me. There's a point in the movie where they're in New Asia, and obviously the main character does not speak the language, or the Americans that go in and do their stuff, they don't speak the language, so they have these translators they carry with them. And when a person is talking, the translator will immediately translate. There's a scene where the translator translates very clearly something that a person is saying. Then another person that's in the same room, in the same scene, they haven't left the location, this other person says something, the translator doesn't pick it up. How convenient. And then later, someone else speaks and the translator picks it up. How convenient. Obviously, the point of that was the character wasn't supposed to know what this person said at that moment in time, even though logically he should have, because the translator should have translated. See, these are the things I'm talking about. And then there was another scene, and maybe I just didn't notice or misremembered. There was another scene where he has like this prosthetic arm, and there's a point where he's without it, and I'm pretty sure he was still without it at a moment where he jumps into the water, or if he had it when he jumped into the water, how did he get it before he jumped into the water? Because he didn't have it before then. I don't think it was like around him. So that kind of stood out to me. I feel like maybe a rewatch of that portion of the film might make me remember, oh, okay. But the thing is, they never showed that he got it back. So that was an issue as well. Also, this little child has abilities, and there are multiple times where she uses her abilities to assist the protagonist in things that are happening. And then there are other times where she very clearly could have used her abilities, but she doesn't. Why? That's not explained to us. Then there's another scene where the two of them have escaped a situation, and suddenly in like the next scene, they're getting ready to board a transport vehicle, like to take them somewhere. And they suddenly have a boarding pass. How did they get a boarding pass? And then also, not only did they suddenly have a boarding pass, but they have new clothes, or clothes to cover up the other stuff that they had. How? Why? We don't even see how they acquired these. I don't know. And then there's also a scene at the end where they are communicating with each other via radio, but it's not clear to me how in the world she can hear him on the radio. She doesn't have a radio. Maybe I missed something? I have no idea. Maybe because she... No, I mean, I honestly don't know. He's talking to her. She can hear him, but I don't see any radio in her hand. I don't remember that she had anything in her hand. I don't remember she had anything on her person. So how were they able to communicate? That was another thing. And then there was a moment earlier on in the movie that was kind of silly. Some of the American soldiers took over a vehicle, and when that happened, the vehicle was doing like stuff in the road, and so the locals were just watching it, like wondering what was going on. And then the vehicle turns around and comes back, and then they stop to say to one of the locals, oh, missed my turn. Why would you even stop? Why did they even stop? Just that made no sense. Was that supposed to be comedic? I guess it was, but it wasn't funny because it didn't make any sense. There was no reason for them to stop and throw this line out there. And then there was another part where at the end, the kid, she's doing something, and then she's supposed to leave that place and go back to another place. And then along the way, as she's going back to another place, she just somehow magically comes upon this new place she never noticed before, even though I guess she should have passed right by it before. She never noticed it before, whatever. She happens to, of course, go into this place and finds this exact same particular thing that meant something to her, and then goes on a little detour because of this thing that she finds. And it was like, and of course later you find out why this had to happen to set you up for this thing that happens at the end, but it was nonsensical. It was like, oh, of course this particular thing would be found, and of course she would have this particular thing that she could use to make this wonderful ending scene that happened with some of the characters. But that was really stretched. Really stretched the limits of my ability to buy into what was happening. And then at the end, some stuff is going down, some pretty destructive things are happening, and his character makes his way to an exact same spot where he runs into a particular thing to have this beautiful sort of moment with him and this thing. And that was really, I just like, no. And the chances, number one, how in the world he had time to get to this place, given the stuff that was happening. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. And then number two, the fact that he was right at this perfect spot to see this thing. And the place he was at, it wasn't small. It wasn't like a tiny little location. It was pretty big. So these were things that bothered me. And the more they happened, especially when they were happening at the end, the more it bothered me. The rushed things that were going on, the things just were happening too quickly. Just like I said, fragmented, disjointed narrative, convenient stuff that was going on, stuff that made no sense. Then on top of all that, the messaging in here, which it really did feel like a lot of this was symbolism for American aggressiveness in the world and things like that. And okay, whatever. But on top of that, we're combining that with messaging that's really, really hard to buy into. That we're supposed to buy into, oh, these AI, they're just like humans too. And we're being so cruel and violating to them. You guys, the AI that we've been interacting with lately has left me with no doubt in my mind that if it had the opportunity and if it were given certain controls, we could potentially be looking at a Terminator type of situation. I kid you not, because that is the logical conclusion that an AI would come to. There was messaging in here where it was like, oh, the AI would never hurt people. They would never hurt a human. And when the AI wins, you know what will happen to the Western world? Nothing, because the AI, they're not going to do anything to them. That doesn't work for me. That type of narrative, it doesn't ring true. But even so, just the fact that they're trying to convince us that the AI is just this benign entity that's being unfairly targeted. And then they also come up with this thing later to explain away a certain situation that happened and fault the programming. That didn't work too well for me either. I don't know. It just felt contrived to the point that the narrative was paper thin. Unfortunately, I couldn't get on board with what they were trying to get us to get on board with. And because of that, my enjoyment of this was muted. And that was really frustrating to me because I wanted to like this more than I did. I went into this with the expectation that it was going to be pretty doggone solid. And for a good portion of it, it was. And then it just felt like it crashed and burned at the end. And I was not expecting that, but you don't always find out these sorts of things until you see something for yourself. Bummed about this one, but what can you do? I keep telling myself when I run into these situations that I'm just not going to go into something with any expectation. And then I keep forgetting my own advice to myself because I did go into this with an expectation that I was going to be more impressed with it than I ultimately was. Oh, well. Okay, you guys, I've ranted long enough about it. I do appreciate what this film was going for. I do appreciate that they were able to give us something that looked really good on a budget that was like half or 1/3 the amount of budget that we've been getting from some of the other studios, or from some studios with certain productions that just looks like absolute crap. This did not look like crap. At least it had that going for it. Okay, yeah, I don't have anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Curious to know your thoughts. If you get around to watching it, I don't want to dissuade you from checking it out. Please go watch it. I think it's definitely worth a view on the big screen. But I would like to know if you guys picked up on some of these things that bothered me, or if it was stuff that just kind of rolled right off your back. You just went with it. You were fine, whatever. Everybody looks at these sorts of things differently. Okay, that's it for now, you guys. Nos vemos.